At our wedding, I thought the day would be the happiest of my life. The hall was decorated with strings of fairy lights, and the scent of fresh jasmine and roses lingered in the air. My heart raced as I walked down the aisle, my mother's hand in mine, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Everything seemed perfect until the music for our first dance began. He leaned close, smiled, and whispered, "This dance is for the woman I've loved for 10 years." The words froze me. My chest tightened, my smile faltered, and the hall seemed to shrink into a sea of curious, questioning faces. I tried to mask my shock, but my mother's hand on my shoulder trembled, her eyes wide with disbelief. My younger brother nudged me under the table, whispering, "What did he just say?" The laughter and chatter of the wedding faded, replaced by a suffocating tension. That night, I lay awake in our suite, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship, questioning if I had been blind or simply naive. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. The following days were heavy with unspoken tension. I tried to throw myself into the routine of our home, cooking, cleaning, and managing the bills, but the pit in my stomach never went away. My mother called almost every day, her gentle voice urging me to talk to him, give him a chance to explain. But the idea of confrontation terrified me. What if the truth was worse than I imagined? I found myself overanalyzing every look, every word, every late-night phone call. Even small things, like him taking longer than usual in the shower or staying behind to help a colleague, became signs in my mind of betrayal. Yet when I asked about them, he laughed lightly and said, "You're imagining things." Nights were the hardest. When the house went quiet, and I was left alone with my thoughts, I cried quietly, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. My inner world was a storm of love, fear, and doubt, and no one seemed able to reach me. Financial and household conflicts soon followed, as if my insecurities had summoned them. Small arguments about bills, groceries, and chores escalated into silent standoffs and tense mornings. I discovered unpaid electricity bills hidden under magazines, mysterious receipts for dinners or gifts I had never received. My mother, trying to help, brought extra meals and tried to mediate, but even her presence sometimes felt suffocating, a reminder of our failures to communicate. Every day became a test of patience, grocery shopping, laundry, cooking, managing work, all under the pressure of a silent accusation in the air. My husband, once attentive and playful, now seemed distant, distracted, and occasionally irritable, which only worsened the tension. I found myself questioning everything about him, about us, and about myself. Am I being paranoid? Am I failing as a wife? Am I imagining betrayal? Sleep became fragmented, filled with dreams of arguments and abandonment, and I woke exhausted, unsure of how to navigate the life I had thought would be full of joy. Then came the first real confrontation, after weeks of unspoken tension. One evening, I could no longer bear it and demanded answers in our living room, where the ticking clock and hum of the refrigerator filled the pauses. "I need to know," I whispered, "who is the woman you've loved for 10 years? He looked at me with a mix of sadness and calm I had never seen before and, slowly, he explained. The woman he had meant was not a lover from the past, it was his mother, the woman who had raised him, who had guided him through hardship, who had been the center of his world in ways I had never realized. Relief, embarrassment, and unexpected warmth flooded me all at once. I laughed and cried simultaneously, my mother joining us in the living room, her tears falling freely. What I had interpreted as betrayal was, in fact, devotion of a different kind. In the days that followed, we slowly began to rebuild trust, re-establishing communication, sharing chores, and rediscovering joy in small, ordinary routines. The house became warm again, laughter returning to the kitchen, quiet hugs in the hallway, and whispered good nights at the end of long days. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Even after the truth came out, life remained a delicate balance of routine and emotional recovery. I noticed the subtleties of living with someone whose inner world was so complicated, whose love had roots I had misunderstood. The mornings were filled with breakfast preparation, school lunches, and work schedules, while afternoons brought laundry, grocery runs, and careful budgeting. Our financial struggles became opportunities to work together rather than against each other. We started planning meals together, comparing bills, and discussing saving strategies instead of letting misunderstandings fester into resentment. I learned that love was not only about grand gestures or dramatic confessions, it was about patience, negotiation, and shared responsibility in the small acts of daily life. I began to feel like myself again, confident in my role not only as a wife but as the center of a household that depended on my emotional and practical stability. Even on difficult days, when arguments flared over forgotten bills or miscommunicated tasks, I felt stronger, knowing that every small reconciliation mattered. My relationship with my mother also grew more complex and tender. She had always been my anchor, but I began to see her as a partner in managing our household, sharing emotional labor and guidance. Late-night conversations over tea often revolved around more than just my marriage. We discussed finances, family planning, and the future of our children. I learned to express my feelings without fear of judgment, and in turn, I saw her vulnerability as a source of strength. Sometimes, when I found myself overwhelmed by the repetitive cycle of chores, childcare, and work, she would step in quietly, helping without commentary, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this life. Her presence, once taken for granted, became a comforting reminder that family wasn't just about blood, but about love expressed in everyday acts of care. The dynamics with my husband slowly normalized, though they were never without tension. There were days when his lingering habit of avoiding certain conversations frustrated me, and nights when I lay awake replaying arguments in my mind. Yet, we began to share our vulnerabilities more openly. One evening, as we sat together folding laundry, he admitted, "I didn't mean to scare you at the wedding. I wanted to honor my mother in the only way I could think of, and I forgot how it would sound." My heart softened as I realized how small misunderstandings can grow into mountains in marriage. We laughed softly, sharing quiet jokes about our domestic life, and in those small, tender moments, I felt the intimacy of a real partnership, flawed, but alive. Our love wasn't the kind that could be declared in a grand dance. It was in the way we shared responsibilities, comforted each other, and forgave mistakes big and small. I realized that a strong marriage required both resilience and empathy, and I had discovered both in myself. By the time our first anniversary arrived, our home had found a rhythm. The kitchen smelled of spices and simmering sauces, the laundry was neatly folded, and the children's laughter echoed through the hallways. I sat in the living room one evening, sipping tea and watching my husband play with our children, feeling an unexpected peace. I thought of the wedding day and his misunderstood words, and I laughed softly, remembering how quickly fear and doubt can take hold in the absence of clarity. Life was still messy, full of financial worries, chores, and small disagreements, but it was also full of love, connection, and shared understanding. I had learned that the most important dances in life are not the ones performed on a stage in front of everyone, but the quiet, everyday dances of patience, forgiveness, and devotion. And as I held my mother's hand and smiled at my husband, I knew that despite the chaos, the miscommunications, and the trials, our family had grown stronger, not because life was easy, but because we chose to navigate it together, one ordinary, emotional day at a time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think.